When people go and vote on election day, they often, when they're voting for an individual, they've made up their mind on that individual's personality, presentation skills, and you try to read that candidate when you see them and use your own gut instincts often. But frequently, we have issues on ballots that are about people, but not necessarily directly. They are about changes in the Constitution. They're about different bond issues, any number of things that come up. And often these are complex and they're a bit more difficult for people to get their hands around. I was having a conversation with Tom Munds a few weeks ago at a restaurant here in Twin Falls. Tom was passing through. He's the state director of the John Birch Society, although he's not appearing today under that guise. He's actually appearing as private citizen because we got into a conversation about a measure on the ballot called HJR 5, which is change to the state constitution and an alteration of that. And we were having a discussion about where we stood on it. And I told him at the time 2 weeks ago I wasn't sure, and I still feel that way today. But Tom has been doing a lot more digging. I'll put it that way. And he joins us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. But Tom, first of all, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Bill. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Twin Falls. Appreciate it.
I was watching a video you had on Facebook last week about the matter, and what this would do is it would give more power to legislators to overrule regulatory decisions made by these agencies, many of them created by legislators, I guess. But if you have a state agency and it comes out and it promulgates a rule and says, because it has the rule of law, but if they say this has to be done, and if the majority of legislators disagree, this would allow them to block that regulation. Am I right in that description?
As far as I can tell, it was a little bit convoluted, and I got to give a little background real quick. And I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm very leery of government in general, and I think we all should be. And I think the more we all learn through history, it becomes more apparent that kind of that's necessary. Um, I saw one night I was working, and I saw a yes on HJR Facebook page come up, and I thought, oh no, no, you don't. So I created a no on HJR5, not necessarily to say no, but to be able to challenge the status quo, because when I'm going to central committees around the state, these are well armed. There's a coalition, I would say, where there is no opposition to anything. And that, to me, in any central committee meeting, throws red flags like you can't believe. I actually voted no. I will tell you that, no problem. I just want to make sure that people are armed with a perspective that they might not know, not necessarily understanding what they mean. It's a very short. HJR5 is very short. It's probably 6 lines maybe. It's amazing that I could come up with 9 pages or 6 pages of questions talking about why it's necessary. So that's kind of the basis for it. Vote however you want. But when you said that it gives the legislature power, that's one of my talking points. And the fact that, and not to condemn you on the radio, that's not my point. It's to be able to call into question, does it give the legislature more power? I mean, here we have a constitution that has checks and balances like our federal constitution does. And basically the words are all there. We just lack the people that are in office lack the enforcement mechanism to be able to use those checks and balances to prevent usurpation.
In fact, I read
So
a Wall Street Journal piece on this last week that hinted it's already being done. We don't need it, I guess, is what the idea was.
I agree. I agree to the very same thing. The problem that I'm coming up against in a lot of cases is people are saying, well, it's just an extra measure. And I said, well, how many Second Amendments do we need? How many First Amendments do we need? How many statutes, how many Title 49, 654-2s do we need to be able to force us to be able to obey the speed limit when we can really choose to whether we want to, run it or not? I mean, that we run the Department of Redundancy Department, and we think somehow if we end up putting words to paper, and this is the same argument, and I've been arguing with attorneys, and they think it's ludicrous that I would even bring up the Article 5 convention, but it's the same premise. We don't want to do the work. We don't want to get our feet dirty and and mud on our face, getting involved in the political fight. So we're just going to go ahead and slip these words in, and somehow they're going to enforce themselves off the page. I mean, it's a ridiculous argument to me.
Well, the legislature obviously had some say and maybe had most of the say in creating these agencies in the first place. I mean, the governor just couldn't create them by fiat. So the legislature already created these agencies because I think in this day and age, a part time legislature doesn't have the time necessarily to do all of this. So they gave that power to these bureaucrats, right? That's how this all works. So, in one sense, they created the monster they claim that we've got now.
Well, yeah, and then the other thing is that HJR 5 claims to be able to allow the legislature to be able to review the rules. Well, if the legislature already doesn't have time to read the bills before they pass them, I mean, I heard Senator Lodge say that right there in the Health and Welfare Committee. If they don't have the time to read the laws and they can't and they suspend the rules so they don't have to read them 3 times, what makes them think they're going to actually go through and review the rules? And so then we start going down the rabbit hole, and I don't want to take you down there any further than you want to go, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Article 4 in our state constitution, Section 20, defines the executive branch agencies. What it does is it says that the legislature, when it says as prescribed by law, to me that means that it's created by the legislature. If you have the ability to create something, I would say you would have the power and the authority to be able to uncreate it, especially if you're identifying the fact that what you have created is a monster, and it's encroaching on the legislature, which could be seen as a violation of the separation of powers. When I go through the state constitution in opposition, I'm looking at Article 2, Section 1 that says the power is divided into 3 branches, that no person exercised in one shall exercise in the other, which means the separation of powers, that one can't encroach on the other. Article 3, Section 1, the legislative power, the enactment clause. Any law that is actually done has to come from either the House or the Senate. And it has to incorporate an enactment clause in order for it to be law, period. So how is it that laws actually are created by the executive branch bureaucracies and somehow they affect us? And I think the biggest part of my argument, and there's several more in our Constitution, the problem that I'm trying to bring home, and I've been very unsuccessful, I might add, about explaining this, is that the executive branch can't write law, then how is it that we're accepting it as the executive branch can write law? Because none of the attorneys I'm talking to are denying that. And how is it that we are allowing them to be able to do that? And doesn't support of HJR 5 then enshrine the bureaucracy's ability to be able to write the law that affects the people? Because this is administrative. And most people don't understand how administrative policy works. Administrative policy isn't law. Wasden went around and toured Idaho, and I spoke with him personally, and he went around the state telling people, I said, what is the biggest problem that you deal with? And he said, the fact that people believe that administrative policy is law. So what does that tell us? It says it right there in our own Constitution, administrative. So if it's administrative and they have the rulemaking power to be able to, the executive branch has the rulemaking power, I'm not denying that they don't have that power. I'm denying that who is that power applicable to, and I would suspect that it's the executive branch and the agencies and how those agencies run within the executive branch. Does that make sense?
Right. In fact, that's how Michael Perutka with I think it's the Institute for the Constitution, once explained executive orders to me, is they apply to the executive branch. In other words, when George Washington issued one, he said we need to buy more printer ink. Things like that would come along, but that they don't actually, technically, they shouldn't have any applicability beyond that. And I guess that's the same thing. So if you have a state department that makes a ruling, it applies within, but it doesn't affect anybody outside that office building.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could look at several agencies. One of them is the Idaho Department of Transportation, which is just, it's unbelievable when you break it down on how the board's created and how the director's created. And then you look at the other one called the Idaho State Police. Now, I'm not against Idaho State Police. Any of you officers about that? That's not about that. This is about fact. It's not about how I feel about police. This is about a constitutional thing. I'm under the impression that the founders had said a government that governs closest governs best. So if that is true, then we have cities that have local law enforcement. We have counties that have sheriffs. What is the need for the Idaho State Police? Now, I'm not saying we should abolish it. I don't want anybody to get all weird and sensitive about all that. That's not my point. My point is that if we are guaranteed a Republican form of government in our states and our federal government, and the executive branch doesn't have lawmaking authority or law enforcement authority at the federal level, then why is it that we have it at the state level when we would see usurpation or a violation of maybe questionable jurisdiction? I mean, can ISP come in? And I mean, they were originally created as mining camp constables. Did you know that?
No, that's a new one for me.
Yeah. So how does an agency under the governor? I mean, this could be. I mean, if you think about if checks and balances were supposed to secure the liberties of the people, then that how is it that the executive branch has the ability to be able to create an executive branch law enforcement agency that actually morphed from something that was really, really small to something majorly significant that could actually be used with boundless power? And one could say, well, Tom, you're making our argument for the support of HJR5. And I'm like, actually, I'm not. We need to start questioning everything and start looking at things outside of what we've been fed. And I've even been realizing that that's been incredibly difficult to do. So I've been frantically trying to read like most of us that are awake have.
Got about a minute left, Tom, minute and a half. For people who are listening today, Tom Munds, by the way, is our guest during this segment of the program. It's 9:18 and it's 45. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story and KLIX. You referenced that you put up a Facebook page. If people would like to see that and have more discussion on this, what's the name of the page again?
It's Vote No on Idaho's HJR5.
Vote no on Idaho's HJR5. And then, so you're opening it up really to a floor debate among people on Facebook.
Yes, I've had attorneys on there. I've had senators on there. I've done the live videos, as you've seen. I've had some pretty good turnout. I think I had 177 views within the first half hour, which is pretty good for me. And then I had a call from a prominent individual that actually just sort of reduced me down to a conspiracy theorist, and I thought we were better friends than that. But when I was suspecting the fact that the governor Otter and Brad Little are in support of this, and the legislature's in support of it, and nobody's opposing this. This should be a huge, huge red flag to anybody, considering the fact that now all of a sudden our state legislature wants to obey the Constitution once we've been fed Obamacare and Common Core and gas taxes and the abolition of our amendment declaring a marriage between a man and a woman null. I mean, what's the whole point? So we've got to go deeper. We've got to start asking more questions. We've got to start dialoguing, and we have to take our understanding of how our government's been working in Idaho and put that all into the mix and see what comes out. And I'm not very happy about what I'm seeing.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you. And as I say, I may be turning back to you because I want to bring this subject up again next week and have more discussion on it, obviously, on air. In the meantime, wish you well and hope you get a lot of likes on that Facebook page.
Always great talking to you, Bill. Thank you.
All right, take care. Tom Munds joining us this morning, talking HJR5, and it's on the ballot 2 weeks from today in Idaho, and how you can get better educated on all of that. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, we'll be talking with Chris Anderson as well this morning from the Harrod Center here at CSI, College of Southern Idaho, campus of Southern Idaho. Call it what you will. That's on the way.